And you got to do the start of the show. No, always just pre-show.
We'll do the start of the show. We can do the intro before Ian comes on. What do you think about that? Yeah, let's do it right now. Why not?
It looks like, yeah. Let's
All right, we'll do it right now.
Let's crank it up. Let's crank it up.
We're cranking it. Let's go. Turn it up. All right, we're live. What's up, everybody? This is episode 13, 14?
I think I'm feeling 13.
I think we're at 13
Lucky 13.
right now.
That was your high school number.
13 is a good number. Numbers. We probably have a whole episode talking about jersey numbers because.
Yeah. You're not that superstitious about numbers, are you?
No, I kind of. It's like if let's say you're young. You know, usually on a team you're young, right? When you first make a team and you're just kind of given a number, I think you got to make something of that number. I think numbers find you. I don't think you find numbers. I think when people get too crazy about that, it's like relax. Like the only reason numbers are numbers because the athlete that was wearing that number, they made the number something.
I agree.
It wasn't like
I agree. I didn't feel that way until I got involved in the youth sports movement, but I do agree with what you just said. I learned that as I matured.
Right. I just matured quicker than you, I guess.
You did.
I did it earlier.
Well, yeah. It's a good point. You're already more mature than I am.
Ouch.
It is what it is.
What am I listening to?
I'm okay with that, though.
Yeah, that's all right.
I'm okay with that.
So, in case you're wondering, this is your first time watching the show. I'm the mature one. He's the young lad that we try to keep in line. It's a little bit past your bedtime. Oh no, we're getting there.
No,
I'll
I'm
put
good.
you to bed soon.
I'm good to about 9:30.
Yeah, he gets a little foggy around 9:30.
But we're going to talk about a lot of good things tonight.
Yeah. So before we bring on, we have an awesome guest, and our focus when we bring the guests on is youth sports. We're going to talk about business of youth sports, professionalism in youth sports. We're going to talk about parents, parenting, parent psyche. There's a lot to unpack. We were talking to Ian earlier. He made a great point. He's like, you can probably spend 3 hours talking about some of the topics we're going to bring up tonight. But before we do that, youth sports is one thing, organized sports, but it leads to another. And what it leads to is recruiting, because players usually and parents get their kids playing and specializing in sports earlier and earlier because they want them to play at whatever is the highest level. So, for hoops, it might be that track to making in the NBA. For a lacrosse player, it might be playing for a college lacrosse program. So talk real quick about some of your philosophies when it comes to recruiting and talk about why you feel that way and why you feel so passionately about certain things when it comes to recruiting.
Well, one of the things I've always been a big advocate of is you have to take the sport, no matter what sport it is, out of the equation when you're evaluating what's the best college choice for your child. And part of that is really knowing your child. And I think what gets convoluted in the whole experience is that parents go, oh, well, they didn't recruit me. Well, what's the difference? If that's the right school for your son, go to that school. And you could walk on, or you could play club, but if you have to play varsity lacrosse, well, then it does get a little skewed.
But what if I'm only getting recruited by one school, and I'm worried that one school isn't going to be recruiting me if I don't make a decision right now? Shouldn't I commit to that one school, and then if no one else recruits me, I go there? If someone else recruits me, I decide to open up my search and go somewhere else?
Well, then you're making a decision on who recruits you. That's the point. The point is that if you know who
but
you
I
are...
might lose that opportunity if I don't...
But if it's not the right school, what's the difference? You're going to go to a school and not enjoy the experience.
Yeah, but college coaches are doing that to athletes. Why shouldn't athletes do that to college coaches?
No, it's values and morals. I mean, you have to stick to your values and morals. And if you feel that's the right thing to do, then do it. I don't. So to me, you should select the school that fits your child. Your child should go out there, find the schools that fit them, and that's the schools. And if it ends up where the sport is not a component, then the sport's not a component. The problem is you're allowing society or the culture that you live in or the community that you live in to dictate where your child's going to go to school because of the sport. That makes no sense. There's no logic behind that. I don't understand why someone would go to XYZ college because they recruited them when it doesn't fit who they are. It makes no sense to me. You got to evaluate who you are. I think one of the biggest issues that you run into is that parents don't really evaluate where their child belongs.
So how can they? So if you're telling me that parents sometimes don't accurately evaluate their kids, how can they get that honest assessment? What do they do?
Well, what do you do? What do you do when you need to do your tax return? You go to a trusted advisor. You go to a good accountant. What do you do when you need a lawyer, or when you need financial assistance? You go to a trusted financial advisor. It's the same thing. That's why.
But are there trusted people like out there in the lacrosse world?
100%. 100%. I mean, we've been doing it for many years. I know the people that we've helped, and I know a lot of other men and women out there that have helped other people. You just have to find somebody that you trust and that will guide you through the process. Mm-hmm. Get to know your child and where your child belongs, both academically, socially, everything that comes in the college selection process.
You know, what's interesting and what some people may not know is you and myself are now consulting people who want to be basically helped through the recruiting process, people other than just FLG kids. Tell me a little bit about why you feel as though we needed to do that. Did you feel as though there's a void that needed to be filled? Did you feel as though there's more people that you can help? Why now? Why is now a good time for you to start reaching out and helping other athletes through the recruiting process?
Well, over the years, I had a lot of people contact me that were not in our program to ask for advice. Okay, and through our experiences, we've guided those people. I mean, obviously, that takes time. So we've put a program in place, and I'm sure you'll talk and tell people about these programs that we've put in place to give these boys and girls more opportunity. But when you have experience in something, it's no different than, we talk about Mr. Macaluso. We'll talk about him for a second. Mr. Macaluso was a gentleman at Cold Spring Harbor High School, and his sole job, he was the guidance counselor for college. The juniors in Cold Spring Harbor, this is nothing to do with sports, would meet with Mr. Macaluso in their junior year. He'd evaluate them. He would guide them in the right fit for these students. I remember with your older sister, unfortunately, he was gone by the time you went through it and Chelsea went through it, but your sister Camber went through it, and he was unbelievable. He had relationships with every admission director throughout the country. I remember when Camber got into a few schools, she went to visit Wisconsin, and the gentleman that was speaking to all the incoming freshmen was the guy that Mr. Macaluso had spoke on the phone to about Camber. And after he spoke, Camber went up to him, and he remembered having the conversation with Mr. Macaluso. I think that's so important in this process, that you have a trusted advisor speaking to the colleges on your behalf, okay? And if the person is respected, the colleges listen.
How does a Mr. Macaluso build so many relationships? Is it any different than how you've built relationships?
No,
I built relationships.
No,
over the years?
it's through meeting people and through them realizing that you're out for the best interest and evaluating what's in the best interest of that young man or young woman, and you're guiding them. You're not telling John Desco at Syracuse that you should recruit this kid when the kid should be playing club lacrosse, at South Carolina.
Right.
It's no different than Mr. Macaluso wasn't telling the Harvard guy, you should take this kid when the kid is struggling to go to, a community college.
Right.
Doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So on this subject, so Richard says kids don't know what school is the best fit since they don't know what they want to do in the future. So that's the benefit of having somebody like that to help guide them to where they need to go. And of course, Paula says, when should this process begin?
The process, Corey and I talk about this all the time. The process begins when the kids are young because, and again, I know you get mad at me when I use this term, but it's a way as a parent to mentally manipulate your child to start thinking about, I have to do well in school if I want to go to these beautiful schools. And it doesn't matter the school. You could drive a fifth grader, into a campus and they could go, wow, this is beautiful. And they're like, well, if you want to go to this school, you better study. So right away you're teaching that child, you better get your head in the books and not just worry about your lacrosse stick or your free throw shooting.
Yeah, and I think, the thought of just thinking about school, but also just the thought of thinking about life after college at an early age really helps. And I think there's general interests that kids have as they move through high school, where you can kind of pick up those signs and you can take those interests and match them up at specific schools based on our experiences. And we've done it all the time. The story of maybe an athlete who got injured and their process of going through physical therapy has steered them into a profession that might incorporate some sort of rehabilitation or recovery. It doesn't have to be physical therapy, but could it be something in that field that allowed them to maybe steer towards that passion and go to a school that allows them to, explore it a little bit more and have time to explore it, so they're not so tied up in sports. So I think the process, like you said, should begin young, middle school, and then as you move through it, as you move through high school, what you want and what you might think you want could change, but at least you're kind of on track and you're doing everything you can to create those opportunities as you move through high school. So that's a good question. It's important to know. And I think one thing that we try to do when we help in recruiting consulting company and the people that we're going to select, February 1st to be a part of the program, because it's not going to be everybody. Part of the process is just that we've created a custom process that basically gives you a 1, 2, 3 step. If you follow this, you'll create more opportunities. And that's something that's been a result of all the kids that we've helped over the last 10 years, boys and girls. Another thing that's really important that we have that I think is kind of unique is creating a custom calendar so parents know exactly what they're supposed to be doing at certain times throughout the year. And I think that's important to know, because you can get really overwhelmed if you think you're always supposed to be doing something, but in reality there's times when you don't really need to be doing much, or you're not really doing much during certain times that are actually really important times to contact college coaches and reach out or build a video, or whatever it is that needs to be done. So those two things are something that we have pretty buttoned up that I think can help really any athlete that's going through the process. And then another thing is, we're going to utilize, fortunately we have Cliff, amazing producer, and Lori and Frank to put together a pretty awesome show. We're going to be doing live streams that educate people through the process. So now we can connect with, if we have 10 people in our next BYG recruiting class, we're going to be able to connect with all of them and answer their questions in one night. And we're going to be able to do that every night, and we're going to be accessible, so that way we are constantly in communication and constantly educating, which is a unique thing that I feel like not a lot of people offer. And I think that's where the void's not being filled, is the educational process and the constant communication, which are two really important things. That should never stop, the educating and the communicating. And I think anyone that thinks they can just pick up a phone call and say, I'm going to get you to this school, that's probably the person you don't want to use as your consultant. And I'm sure the same goes for, when you mentioned using an accountant or a financial advisor, there's someone that I've been speaking to about insurance. I've met with them 3 times already, and they haven't asked for a dollar. It wasn't a phone call saying, hey, I suggest this package, like, go for it. It's something that you should really get to know the person. It's a big decision, but I think through all the educational information that we offer, people can really understand what we have to offer and how we can potentially help. So, that's pretty, that's kind of my 2 cents on.
You got to feel comfortable, and it's funny. You got to trust the person that you're asking for advice. And I don't. It doesn't matter what the advice is. You know what I'm saying? But you have to trust the person. But more importantly, is you have to listen and take their advice. But if you don't believe what they're saying to you, if what they're saying to you you don't agree with, at the end of the day, it's your decision.
Right.
So, it's not like we're making the decision for the student athlete. We just had an episode with one of our boys where we were talking to them, and because it's now a slow time because college lacrosse is starting and all the college coaches are worried about their teams and recruiting's on the back burner, kids are starting to get antsy. They're getting recruited, and they're like, well, should I take my opportunity that's out there? Well, why are you taking that opportunity now? Because the phone's not ringing, or the emails aren't coming, or the texts aren't coming? I mean, you got to really relax and allow the process to happen.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of people get antsy and they jump on that first opportunity. It doesn't always work out.
Well, it's good to know that, maybe now is the time that there isn't a ton of recruiting activity. Not everyone knows that. And I think that's why you want to lean on someone that knows what they're doing, they've been through it, and you trust. Because if someone trusts your advice and they're telling you that right now it's not, that not big a deal, that you're not talking to a million coaches and there aren't a ton of people responding to you, I think that kind of levels out the anxiety, it lowers it a little bit, and allows parents to focus on, I think, what's most important right now for a high school student athlete, which is, okay, maybe you got some SAT prep going, maybe you got some community service you got to take care of, you got to keep your grades up, and then, if you're playing sports, you got to focus on whatever your winter season is right now, and then maybe if you're preparing, you don't do a winter sport, you're preparing for your spring high school season. So, again, that's part of the calendar, right? Like those are things that we know that we can wholly help other people, know as well. So, Yeah, that's basically the BYG recruiting service. That's good advice just from a recruiting standpoint. And I think, before we introduce Ian and talk youth sports, I think, Frank, if you don't mind just rolling the BYG video, if you got that up there.
We need like one more minute.
Okay, no problem. We'll
It's on
take
the way.
a few more minutes. It's all good.
Well, one of the things I wanted to talk about is the anxiety that the student athlete goes through.
Yep.
And I think it's important that everybody out there can take their children and relax them and make them understand that this is not a process that is as easy as just saying, all right, I'm committing to this school. You should visit endless amount of schools. I mean, we go on the road tour that we're going to go on in February that we do every year. We strongly suggest that the families take the February break and set up their own road tour and do their own road tour that fits their child.
Yeah, that's a great point. I sent a message to our FLG families the other night talking about creating a custom road tour for our families. And I got a couple texts back from our players after I sent the video out. And one of the guys in our program is a junior. He's going to like 6 or 7 schools, maybe more, during his February break. That's someone that I know once they decide where they're going to go to college, they're going to be happy for 4 years. And they're going to be successful after that because he's doing his homework. He really wants this. He's steering the ship. His parents, fortunately, have the time or offering him the time and are providing enough resources to, take him around to these schools and create these experiences where he's going to get a chance to see all these amazing places. And he's going to have a great decision when it's all said and done. And then we have other families that are like, hey, I'm thinking about maybe taking a trip to visit my daughter. She goes to school here. Here are a couple of schools I was thinking about. What, should we be adding some? Should we be taking some away? Are we going in the right direction? And I think that's great. And again, that's part of the communication, and it's kind of that map that you're creating for the family, so that way they have a little bit more experience when they go through it. And I mean, a visit, it could be, like you said, driving through a campus, or it could be like you're eating you're eating lunch with your family in the cafeteria, and all of a sudden you talk to the student and you end up talking to them for an hour, and you learn so much about something you never even know you think about. And I think I draw it back on our experience when we went to the UMass Amherst Eisenberg Sports Management career fair that's run by the students. Unbelievable. So Alexa, who works with us, she's our director of events. We call her the head honcha of events. She showed us around the whole campus, right? That was like better than any tour you can possibly get from a coach or a regular student or anybody.
Remember we went to that cafeteria? Their cafeteria, they're the number one ranked food, best food in all the country. And the experience was so cool because we were sitting there and I was this place is amazing.
Yeah. That's something we used to say all the time when we were talking to recruits, do your pros and cons list, how beautiful is the campus? What are the buildings like? What's the food like? But until you experience the best dining hall in all of college in America, you don't really realize how important the food is. It changes your whole experience because you want to you're excited to go get swipe your meal card every day. Not many kids get excited about that. They're
true.
They're trying to pawn off. They're trying to corral the freshmen to basically be take these meals and give me your money so I can actually go get Chipotle or something like that. Especially if you're local near Sasset.
You got it. So we're gonna bring Ian on.
So we're gonna bring Ian on after our commercial break here, and we'll see you guys in a couple minutes. Organized sports can be overwhelming, and the recruiting process beyond. We untangle it all with our common sense approach. Learn from our experience, then go on and create your own. FLG Lacrosse has created a recruiting service with one goal in mind: create more opportunities for your lacrosse recruit. We've created a step-by-step process that's been tested and proven by hundreds of student athletes, both boys and girls. Our process includes a month-to-month, as well as a year-to-year calendar, an online recruiting platform to keep everything organized, access to every single college coach in the country, both men's and women's, educational live streams just for you, where you can answer questions and talk about your concerns with us, as well as consulting on what events to go to and which events to stay away from. And we also give you access to our alumni network of over 100 men and women who have gone through the recruiting process. They're now in college, and some have even graduated. We are now accepting applications for the BYG recruiting service.
Because your commercial.
Our application window is going to end on February 1st, 2019. So be sure to apply today at byglacrosse.com. You should do a new window. Are you playing Cliff's commercial now too? Or no? Yeah, play both.
Did you know that by
I'm afraid you're going to lose people.
It's all right, we'll get them back on.
You can go play. Did it just freeze?
All right, we're going back to you guys.
Okay.
All right, that's cool. All right, what's happening? We're live, guys. Ian, we got you on the line, my man?
I'm here. Thanks for having me, guys.
Of course, it's a pleasure to have you. Now, I don't know about you, Dad. I don't know if we talked about this, but my first understanding of who Ian was and what he's all about was through his email newsletter. I remember reading, at the title, I think it said like the chaotic world of like youth sports, and I remember reading these articles. I'm like, these are awesome, and I feel like we might have even like both said, hey,
No.
have you read these articles?
No, I found them first. I owned Ian first. I'm gonna take credit for that because I was reading them and I was like, this guy's got his shit together, and I want you to listen to what's going on. And then I reached out to him, and then I said, check out our blogs. And Ian checked out some of our blog that you posted on the back of the website,
Mm-hmm.
And I think he even posted one on one of his newsletters.
Yeah, what was that about? It was a story that you told.
What was it? Speaking for yourself? I don't remember. Ian, do you remember?
I don't remember. That was a while back, but we did post some of your stuff as well.
Well,
Take the world through what Ian is and what he does.
We appreciate that. Actually, Ian, if you don't mind, I kind of want you to take everyone through who's watching tonight and anyone who is going to watch us a little bit later about, not just your blog that you started. I know you guys do so much more. You have a super comprehensive company and what you do, and tell us a little bit about yourself and your history and your company, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show again. So I'm a New Jersey sports dad and a soccer and basketball coach, but I'm also the founder of iSport 360. I've been coaching my two little girls for maybe like 7 years now. And the first thing I noticed was a real disconnect between coaches and parents on a team. And it's something that, as I asked around my community and to people involved in youth sports like you guys, it just seemed to be a trend, or even worse, maybe an epidemic. So I started iSport 360 I conceptualized it about 3 years ago, launched it about 2 years ago, and we really do two things. The first is we created a mobile app that helps coaches and parents share feedback on their players, set goals with their players, track player progress. And this is not a tool for elite athletes. This is a tool to help every individual child achieve success, whatever that means for them. And so we have about 11,000 coaches, parents, and kids on the platform. But what I also felt very passionate about was launching a newsletter where we could write articles with the help of psychologists and educators and professional athletes and professional coaches, anyone who could help shed light on some of the big issues in youth sports, some of which we're going to be talking about tonight. And I really felt like sports parents are just like a magical mystery. And I wanted to educate sports parents. I wanted to share some humor with sports parents, but I also wanted to share some of our own firsthand mistakes that we made as sports parents, as coaches, so parents can learn from those experiences. So that's kind of the genesis of iSport 360.
Now, we were on a webinar to learn a little bit more about iSport 360. One guy that was on there, someone that we looked up to, Marquise Colston.
Yeah, Hofstra wide receiver, played for the Saints.
Always on our fantasy team. We love that guy. And then we got a chance to listen to him, and we're like, we love him even more. Tell us why you have someone like that involved. And you talk about professional athletes, and a lot of kids aspire to play at that level and be like a guy like Marquise one day. So talk about his impact and why have someone like that involved.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, it's Marcus.
Sorry.
And Marcus he's just an amazing guy. First of all, played football at the most elite level. and was a superstar. He actually left the NFL, went to business school, and he did well in the NFL, so he started making investments. But the difference between Marcus and a lot of other athlete investors is that Marcus, number one, wants to roll his sleeves up and get his hands dirty in your business. He wants to help. He wants to have responsibility, and he wants to really contribute to your success. I loved that about him. The second thing about Marcus is that he really has been building community amongst all of these athletes who are retiring from a sport and want to become entrepreneurs or want to become investors. Certainly, a lot of them have the money to do that, but they don't necessarily have the skills. So Marcus has been working with a lot of athletes. He works with organizations across the country. I know he's been working on a new program at Columbia for professional athletes that are looking to get into the startup community. So he's just a super guy. Yes, he was on the webinar, and I hope to be doing a lot more work with him.
Interesting.
One topic that we wanted to bring up was the psyche of the parent. What does that mean to you? What is the sports parent psyche, and how does that relate to everything that's going on in youth sports today?
So everybody. Well, let's just say I think there's a consensus that parents can ruin a child's youth sports experience. And, I saw some complicated parents in my time coaching. I absolutely saw some parents on the opposite side of the soccer field or the basketball court from me who were yelling the complete opposite instructions that I, as the coach, was calling out to their kids. I certainly saw some parents, lose control. And it's definitely a slippery slope. We've all seen parents who start the game by doing a little bit of cheering, and then they start to coach their kid a little bit. Then they start to yell at the refs a little bit. And, there's a very fine line that you have to cross in order to turn into a verbal altercation with a coach or a ref, or even, physical violence. And we've seen it. So when we talk about the parent psyche, I wanted to really study sports parents. So we have an advisor on our advisory board. He's a psychologist. He helps us understand the psychology of sports parents, the physiology of sports parents. And what I learned is that parents know not what they do. And what I mean by that is they get to the ball field, they could be the friendliest, warmest, funniest friend of yours. But when they see their child getting knocked down on the field, getting the ball taken away from them, losing, getting taken out of the game, for a substitute, they really start to lose control, and their bodies actually go into fight or flight mode. This is when your stress hormones are elevated, your cortisol levels, and you start to behave in a way where you say things and do things without actually thinking. And that really explains a lot of the problems that we see at the ball field. So I've taken a real interest in this. I know books are starting to be written on this topic. Documentaries are starting to be created. And the sports parent is someone who I have a lot of empathy for, even though they do take a lot of the heat for problems in youth sports.
Sure. There's a video that we wanted to show you. I'd like to, you have that video up, Frank? We're going to show it to you, Ian. I'd just like to hear your opinion of it.
Play a couple, 10 seconds, 15 seconds.
A fight outside Marymount Junior High School after a youth league basketball game on January 19th. At least one parent nearby called 911.
This has been an argument between parents and basketball players.
Okay, is it verbal or physical?
Verbal right now. There's some physical.
So we have basically a scene of, and it's on the news, I feel like I've seen this a lot, especially on the internet. You have two parents getting into a physical altercation at it's like a fourth grade travel basketball game. So I guess my question to you, Ian, is you talk about, that fight or flight mode. How can you prevent parents from, getting to this point. It's happening all the time. Parents are going to continue to take their kids and watch their kids and coach their kids, whether it be because they're the coach on the sideline where the coach is supposed to stand, or because they're coaching their kid on the opposite sideline, like you talk about as a parent. And they're going to see their kid get bumped and pushed and fouled and taken out, and that's not going to change, because with organized sports, that's how it works. It's not pickup sports. So how can parents learn to control themselves, and how can we prevent more and more of these instances from happening out there in organized sports?
Yeah, it's horrible how many of these videos you see, going around. It just happens every weekend. So I have two recommendations. The first one is based on the fact that I think youth sports is truly a test of adults' discipline. I mean, we really need to work hard to manage our emotions, and not everybody can do it. So listen, when my daughter doesn't play well or someone fouls my daughter, of course, as a parent, I immediately get angry. But it really takes a lot of discipline for me to kind of put that away and say, you know what, my daughter's in a tough basketball game right now. She's going to learn. The referees are not perfect. They're local referees. They're going to make mistakes. So I would just encourage discipline. And it's something that I really preach to the parents on the teams that I coach. But the other strategy is just to add a little bit of humor to the situation. The parents on the teams I coach, they know that I write a newsletter that's read by 60,000 people. They know if they misbehave, I will threaten to write an article about them, even though I'm only half serious. But the truth is, I have a few very passionate parents on the teams I coach, and I start the game and I just say to them, I dare you to spend the first half of this game with your butt in the chair and not saying one word. And, they laugh and they're like, well, can I cheer? Can I, say good job? And I say to them, no, you cannot say one word, because a cheer leads to a little bit of coaching, leads to a little bit of encouragement, but then leads to, just constantly yelling out. So I dare you to go the first half of the game without saying one word. And you know what? It's funny to watch. It's almost impossible for those parents to do. So we're going to do
Ian, I have to be honest. I'm listening to this, and I think what's important here is that, the old saying, don't throw stones in a glass house. I remember when you yelled at me in the Yale game. I'll never forget this. Corey's playing Yale.
Lost it.
They're losing 10-0. They come back and they make a run, and it was like a 1-goal game. And one of Corey's teammates does something that, I classify as a dumb play. I don't remember what I said, but Corey literally looked at me in the middle of the game and told me to shut the F up. It was perfect. And it was that's a great life lesson at the time. I was probably what was it? You're out of school 8 years. It was probably 10 years ago. So I was a 47-year-old man and my 20-year-old son, and you were probably a sophomore, or I don't know what year you were.
It felt good.
It was great. It's so true, what you're saying. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, I still have you calm me down with officials.
Absolutely. No, you have to, like Ian said, that discipline is developed. You have to really focus on it. And
I'm still working on my discipline, Ian, but I'm getting there.
We're going to work together, and you know what? Between you guys and your company and my company, I think we should start a viral challenge. Instead of pouring ice buckets over people's heads, it's going to be the keep your ass in the chair challenge. Can you go a full game as a sports parent and keep your rear end in a chair?
I think that's amazing. And you get the younger siblings who, aren't old enough yet to play at that level. They can video it and they can submit it. Their parents sitting there wanting to say something.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
I love that.
How can you do that at a wrestling match? I got a buddy who has 3 kids that wrestle, man. That's got to be tough for wrestling matches.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was watching a wrestling match. A bunch of our kids were in this wrestling match in Syracuse. And the coaches, man, I was thinking about these coaches. They were coaching the hell out of these kids, helping them. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying to myself, that's just one match. This guy's doing 12 kids.
Yeah.
So he's doing this 6 minutes times 12. that coach has to be exhausted. Forget the kids. It's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
you take wrestling, martial arts. I watch ice hockey. I mean, if my kid got knocked down, checked, I would lose it. It's probably why they have the plexiglass around the rink.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good idea, the plexiglass, right? They should do that around like lacrosse fields.
That's right. That's right.
So, Ian, let's talk a little bit about how some youth organizations and youth sports teams, they play to win. And some of them play for development and for fun. And I feel it's so funny. Like, I almost feel like it's like sappy to say, like, you sometimes create a program where you want kids to have fun, but like, then I think to myself, like, that's what kids are supposed to be doing. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, why is there like a kind of almost like a stigma around the word fun? And it's like, it's almost, you can't associate the two things. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, programs playing to win versus playing to have fun and get better?
Yeah, so we actually wrote an article called, I think it was called Fun versus Winning, the Parent's Dilemma. And the reason I wrote the article was because we started my daughter's soccer season. I think she was probably like a U9 player at the time. So these girls were young. And I started the season and I said, parents, we're going to have so much fun. Our number one priority is for the girls to have fun. And all the parents, cheered and applauded and nodded. And then we lost our first 3 games, and the parents started to lose their minds on the sideline. New strategies for what we need to do, and telling me, the team is going to fall apart. And what I realized at that moment is that every parent and every organization starts the season by saying, we want the kids to have fun. But it's very hard to maintain, and this comes back to the discipline again, but it's hard to maintain your spirit as an adult when you're losing games. But the fact is, those 9-year-old girls, they were having fun. And when we lost, the only thing that upset them was seeing the frustration on their parents' faces. But within like a half hour after the game, they went for ice cream or they went for pizza, and they forgot about the loss. So, my record as a youth sports coach indicates that I do not put winning first. But it is hard to do. As adults, we have emotion and we want kids to succeed. And, in order to be recognized for a college scholarship, you need to be on a good team. So I understand that. But at the same time, especially 8, 10, 12-year-olds, even 14-year-olds, I think fun has to be at the top of the priority list. And if these kids don't want to go out and play as a team, don't want to go out on their driveway, shoot some hoops, go out in the backyard and, play with their friends, then that's a bad sign.
Well, I think one of the issues, Ian, and this is part of where I have a problem in our sport, is that the only way parents know how to quantify is by the score of the game. Because most parents aren't educated enough to sit there and evaluate how their child is progressing. And one of the things that bothered me is the governing body of lacrosse is U.S. Lacrosse, and they have a magazine that they put out every month. They started rating club programs. And I was thinking to myself, you're the governing body of a sport and you're rating club programs? Well, how are you rating them? By the teams that win the tournaments? And these are youth teams? I mean, isn't there something wrong with that?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And if you don't mind me adding to that, my daughter, so my younger daughter is a U10 player, and we got an email just a few days ago from a local New Jersey soccer team that's looking for U10 players, and it said, we are the number 16 team in the country. That was how they're, and like you say, so unfortunately there is a lot of that going on. I hate to hear when it's the national governing body that's doing that. There's definitely some companies in the youth sports space that encourage the rankings of these teams at the young ages, but I'm against that. I mean, I want kids to have a winning spirit. I want them to play their best and succeed, but these rankings at a very early age of teams and academies is not helping the kids in their sport.
But here's my thought process. Everybody that's doing that is doing it for an economic purpose. So a magazine is doing it so they can sell magazines. You know, they're like Inside Lacrosse ranks players. You know, here's the top 50 in this class. Here's the top 50 in that class. Here's the rankings of, and it's funny, I see them do rankings of high school lacrosse where they're ranking a Long Island team against the Maryland team, against the Denver team, against the California team, against the Florida team. And they can't quantify what they're doing. It's an opinion. So, you know, it's funny, what we did in our magazine is we had the coaches, and that's what they do in college lacrosse. They have a coaches poll. So you have the most educated people about the sport, in my opinion, which are our high school coaches on Long Island. And we go, okay, 50 coaches, give me your top 10. We take all their data and we come up with a top 10. Well, at least there's 50 educated people that know all 50 teams doing this. In the Inside Lacrosse poll, it's Maryland against Long Island. They don't play each other.
Well, if you aren't going to quantify how good a team is by their wins and their losses, how else do you guys recommend that you quantify teams and players?
Well, is this the first boost for iSport 360?
This is it. This is your time, eh?
Yeah, thank you. So, you know, one of the reasons we started this company was because rankings of players are so subjective, especially at the local level within your own club. Yep. And, you know, typically when you're trying to decide who's going to make your teams, you do your tryouts and you have different coaches on different fields making different decisions. So there's subjectivity and there's inconsistency. And the reason we created our player evaluation tool, which is just one of the features we have, is so that every coach that's coaching, call it U12 girls lacrosse, is using the exact same scoring method, the exact same standards, the exact same system. And if you, for example, let's just say US Lacrosse embraced iSport 360, they would have coaches in multiple states all using the same evaluation tools, which, by the way, don't just keep track of kids' technical skills, but coaches also put, you know, field awareness, tactical skills, physical skills, life skills like coachability and teamwork. So you really get to see the whole player. I would actually love to see rankings in Inside Lacrosse that talk about players across the country that have the leading scores as a whole player with consistency from one state to the next and one coach to the next. So, you know, thanks for asking that question and giving me the chance to talk about that.
I think it's important. Well, you know, one of the things that I did years ago when Corey was an 18-year-old senior is he tried out for the U19 USA team. And I went down to the tryout. And the reason I was there, even though, you know, I have people tell you there to watch your kid, be honest with you, I spent more time with the coaches and the evaluators to learn how they were evaluated. I thought they did an unbelievable job, in my opinion. And they had a whole system set up. It's exactly what you're talking about. And they literally, how they selected this team, it was amazing. And they did a great job. And I used a lot of those systems to pick our teams. And one of the things that I think is so important is exactly what you say, because if I think that your son is number one and Corey thinks that, you know, Cliff's son's number one, but we all rank them and then we have 10 guys ranking them and, you know, little Ian ends up getting 1s and 2s and 3s and we add them up and little Ian has the lowest number, well, he's the number one ranked kid. And then the next isn't, I mean, there's a system at least in place. And there's going to be people, you know, I look at an attackman and say he's better. Corey looks at another attackman and thinks he's better. That's okay. But when you take everybody's data similar to a coach's poll, now at least you have a system in place and you have data where you can go back to the parents and say, this is why your child did not make the team.
Correct. That's exactly right. And you know, in this day and age, when parents are spending so much money on their kids' sports, they want that information and they actually deserve it. I mean, could you imagine if you sent kids to school and got no feedback on how they were doing, no report cards, no testing quiz grades? You'd be completely in the dark. And that's why, when parents are paying the price that they are these days for any of the youth sports, they deserve to know, where their kids need help in different skills. And by the way, that, and I know this is the case with you guys, that needs to be going on throughout the season so that at tryout time, it's not a huge surprise who makes the team or who doesn't. I mean, if the coach has been telling you that your child needs to work on a skill all season long and they haven't really shown progress in that skill, that's probably the reason that they're not going to make the team or get the starting position.
I find just this functionality so interesting, not just from like a youth sports perspective, but even from like a college sports perspective. I remember, when I was in college, there was always a depth chart, and our coach was pretty transparent of who, was the best player at certain positions. But again, it was still pretty subjective as to why, I was the third best attackman and why Mike was the first best defenseman. Ian, do you have now college and high school programs starting to use your software for that reason, to kind of rank their own players and be transparent with their guys as to why who's playing a little bit more than other guys?
We don't have colleges, but we do have high schools, lots of travel teams, and even some recreation teams. For us, really, the most popular ages are between 8 and 14 years old. And we have about travel teams are the leading type of team. So yes, coaches are using our platform to share that, to let parents and coaches know where their kids need some work. And really, it's not about rankings, and it's not about comparing a player to the other players as much as it is having that player have the most success and develop as quickly as possible. So coaches are able to work one-on-one with a player and their parents.
I think the report card, I like to use that as a way for parents to understand it, and then or a progress report.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why we're going to be working with Ian's company is we feel it's important to give a parent progress report. I remember we always used to do it at the end of the year, where we would give we would call it Steps to Greatness, and each kid would get basically a write-up on things they had to work on, things they did well. And it was funny, 2 years ago, Corey was coaching a 6th or 7th grade team, and Corey was, I'll use the word, very honest to his athletes. And a few of the kids' parents called, and a few kids didn't even try out because they thought they were going to get cut. And in reality, we had this one parent who's arguably one of our better parents in our program, who said, "This is great because every time I say to my kid, get in the backyard and get on the wall, Corey said, now I'm not even using a parental thing. Corey said you need to work on your left hand.
Yeah.
Well, Corey said you need to work on this."
Well, I think the problem.
Other parents were like, "Oh, my kid's going to get cut. I'm not going to try out because I don't want my kids to deal with that. I don't want them to deal with possibly getting cut," which to me is a character flaw. No, make your kid work harder. What's wrong with that? Right? In school, you get a B+. Well, what do I got to do to get an A?
Well, I think there was a lot of inconsistency with the grading system. It was, my 3 out of a 5 ranking might have been really critical to a kid, but in reality, I didn't give more than a 4 to anybody.
Yeah,
but other
5
coaches
is perfect, and no one's perfect.
But if we have another coach in the program that's ranking 5s for all these kids, they might be comparing to the older brother who has a different coach. So
That's
I think
true.
That's what I really like about how the iSport is set up. It's progress of each and every player in different categories and different skills, and I think it's something that you can really track year to year, and you can also track throughout within your own program. So there's consistency amongst teams and coaches, which is something that I think was lacking in our program, which I'm hoping to fix.
Yeah, I agree. That's great.
I wanted to talk to Ian real quick about, because I know we're running out of time here. One last thing is just the idea of free play. With organized sports being so popular and it being a huge business now that so many people are getting involved in, it kind of consumes a lot of not just the best athletes to play all these sports and do all these things, but it's consuming just a lot of kids who want to play sports in general because they feel as though they're missing out if they're not part of travel and club. So, in your experience, Ian, like what are some ways that, I don't know, we can maybe simulate free play? And if you want to maybe just talk about why free play is important and based on your research in kids that are, let's say, below 14 years of age.
Yeah, I think there's two themes here. One is just like you said, I think parents today have a fear of missing out with their kids, and they feel like if their kid is learning to play basketball on the driveway, it's not as good, or they won't get as much recognition as if they try out for the travel team. I actually would make the case that like most of my friends, we learned how to play basketball in someone's backyard or on someone's driveway. And that's really how you got good. So, fear of missing out, unfortunately, is driving people away from free play and towards organized sports all the time. So it's definitely a problem. But the other thing I was going to mention is, the Aspen Institute does a lot of research on free play because they're trying to encourage it. Obviously, there are lots of kids that can't afford to participate in travel sports, and therefore they should have lots of options and be able to go and play sports and organize themselves. But the word that comes to mind for me is empowerment. And I'm as guilty as any parent of this generation, but I feel like our kids are not really well equipped to go out and organize a game, choose up teams, referee themselves, keep score themselves. And this empowerment is what kids need to take control of their own destiny, to take control of their own development. And I think it goes hand in hand with free play. It happens to be like a huge theme they talk about in education, but I definitely feel like we need to be empowering our kids more and giving them more of the control over their own activities and decisions.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny. We talked of a story earlier. We told you the story about the kids playing, and the fifth grade girls were playing 5-on-5, and before one of our clinics, and they did their own thing, and then we got a phone call from a mom because her daughter was picked fifth, and the mom used the buzzword bullying as if these kids were bullying them, and they were just like basically picking a team so that they could, play a 5-on-5 lacrosse game. And that's where I think there's the disconnect. The disconnect is, and I go back to this. I do something in our box clinic where I make the kids come up and check themselves in for attendance, 3rd grade to 12th grade. And you wouldn't believe how many times that little girl or little boy is standing next to her or his mom or dad, and I'm staring, I bend down, and my head's right in front of the little girl, little boy's head, and I say, "What's your name?" And the mom or dad say the name. And I'm like, if you can't allow your child to say their name, how are you going to allow your child to do anything? And this is all part of, we talk about mentally manipulating, but we have to help. We have to help parents. And what you're doing, and you help me. I mean, I learned a lot from reading all the stuff you guys do, and I'm sure you can help a lot more parents. And obviously, we're going to get the word out to a lot more people about what Ian and his company is doing, and we're going to utilize his services in the future and hopefully help our kids and more kids that way.
Yeah, and I hope we want to attract more like-minded people, and we want to help more people, like you said. And I'm excited to dive a little bit deeper as a coach, as a youth coach, into the app and to helping players develop the right way. And I'm excited to learn more about it. So, Ian, we appreciate your time here, all your insight, and I guess you want to real quick, finish with how people can continue to follow iSport360, your blog. If you guys are on any social media accounts, let us know where we can find you.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, guys. You're doing great work as well, and I look forward to doing more of it together. So our website address is iSport360.com. You can go there. You can get a free season of our app. You can sign up for our blog, which is free. We send it out every 2 weeks. We have great people writing really engaging educational and funny articles in there. And I hope we can help your program across the tri-state area here and beyond.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being on, E. You've been great, and I'm sure we'll be talking again real soon.
Good stuff. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Take care, buddy.
Thanks, Ian.
No, that was great. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny when I first read his stuff and realized what a quality human being he was. And I mean, you get to see him and you get to hear him, and I think it's so important. I think his thoughts need to be spread because we're seeing too much. And again, it's because people show the bad stuff.
Yeah.
You know, there's plenty of men and women out there that are like, you know, Ian.
Yeah.
We need to show more of that.
Yeah, exactly.
And let the world know that there's more of that out there, and we know that because, you know, we see plenty of great people out there when we're on the fields. And
Yeah, most of our experiences are not what you see on the news with parents fighting and brawling because of something that happens at a youth sports game. So, you know, I'm excited to learn more about what he's doing, so it can, as a result, help our kids. And you know, a lot of good stuff. He's always got some good wisdom, and I love how they're thinking about it from a psychological perspective, because I think a lot of times in sport there's not much thought. It's just like competitiveness and like winning drives everything, and everything else, like your morals, what you believe in, what's right and wrong, what really you should be doing, it all like takes a back seat because the primary goal is winning, and that's you know, that's really not right, I think, at a youth level. So I think he has a really fresh perspective, and he's trying to find a good way to engage with his audience. He's not just, you know, he's taking a humorous approach, because sometimes when you're too serious about it, you know, parents probably feel bad about their actions and they don't want to change. But
well,
you know.
I mean, no disrespect, but I mean, I'll be the first one to tell you I've made the mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
So if I've made the mistakes and I can learn from them, so can everybody else.
Sure.
Tonight I was sitting at dinner and you sent me a picture of your daughter having dinner, and my text back to you was, "There's nothing better than the smile of your child and the laughter," and there really isn't. To see people happy. There's a clip I saw on Facebook today too. A guy gets on the subway. I don't know if any of you guys seen this, and he has earbuds in, and he's watching a video on his phone, and he starts laughing hysterically.
Yeah.
And the whole you seen this?
No.
The whole subway, he's laughing like it's a comedian. I don't know what's on the thing.
Yeah.
The whole subway starts laughing hysterically. It's the greatest. I mean, it's viral.
What's really funny about that video, I was actually just listening on the way to work, a podcast about laughter and how it can just consume you. And this one guy who's on the podcast tells a story about how there was this, I'll come up with the name of it, or maybe I'll say it next week. There was this old talk show between two guys that were auto mechanics, and they would talk about how to fix cars, and the show was just about educating people, and they would just go off and rant and start hysterically laughing. And this one guy was telling the story about his buddy, who was an immigrant who didn't speak English, that used to always listen to the show, and he loved the show because he just loved how these guys would just start cracking up because it made him laugh, you know. And it was like an amazing thing, and I thought that was great. And it's just like laughter is like this universal language that can like take over you.
Exactly. You don't even have to know what's going on. It's just great, and it makes you feel so good.
Yeah.
There's nothing better than a good laugh.
Good laugh is good.
Right?
I think we might need next week. I don't know what we're doing just yet, because there's a couple. We have a good show next week. That I can tell you, but we have a guest that's going to come on sooner, potentially later. Casey Vach.
Oh,
You want
you
a
want
good
to talk about
laugh?
laughter?
Guy's the man.
I want everybody out there to Google Casey Vach.
Casey Vach, Lacrosse.
He used to work for Inside Lacrosse. He now works for 3D Lacrosse, and
He'll give you a good laugh.
He is a genius when it comes to the sport of lacrosse.
He's awesome. So, Cliff, yes, sir.
Yeah, have you guys ever heard of a book by Norman Cousins called Anatomy of an Illness?
No. I've never.
I highly recommend this book. It was written probably 40 years ago about a guy who had a life-threatening illness. He was given a few months, and he put himself on a therapy of laughter. Read funny books, listened to funny comedians, watched funny movies, and he lived like another 50 years.
Wow.
His
That's
name is
amazing.
Norman Cousins. It was a very famous book called Anatomy of an Illness.
I think we should make that a movie. It'd be a great movie.
Starring
Starring Cliff
Cliff
Silva.
can go another 50 years.
Now I'm laughing. Now I'm laughing.
I'll start like this.
Yeah, now I'm laughing.
All right, we got to let everybody go because we're probably past
Yeah.
our time.
I think we need to get some Just for Men for the beginning part of the movie for Cliff. And then
What do you say?
Nothing.
nothing.
He said, you look fantastic.
You do. You look great tonight. It's all those salads you're eating.
So we'll see everybody next Tuesday night.
Next Tuesday night we'll be here.
It'll
and,
be February.
Yeah, it's February, and then we'll see you next Tuesday.
Take care, guys.
Have a good night.
Later, Frankie.